Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you all to this session, Gathering at the Table, How to Build Your Team for A&OER Campus Success. My name is Lindsay Schmitz, and I will be your moderator today. I have just a few logistical items before we get started. You can access the live captioning of this presentation under the Handouts tab. A copy of the PowerPoint presentation is also available under the Handouts tab. Please enter all your questions into the live Q&A box, and we will answer those questions will be answered at the end of the session. If you have any technical issues, the MEC staff are behind the scenes to help you. Please be sure to reach out through the live support button. And now I would like to introduce our speakers today. Kayla Reed is the systems librarian from Missouri Southern State University. Lisa Farrell is the director of library services at East Central College. Megan Phifer-Davis is the Assistant Manager of Reference at St. Louis County Library, and Christina Virden is the e-resource coordinator at the MOBIUS Consortium. And now I will turn it over to them. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining us on a Friday afternoon, and welcome to Gathering at the Table, How to Build Your Team for A&OER Success. My name is Megan Phifer-Davis. You can't see me at the moment. I will actually be speaking on my experience from Lindenwood University. Lisa Farrell, Kayla Reed, and Christina Virden will be talking about their experiences at their respective institutions. We can go next slide. So for our presentation today, we're going to highlight a few departments that are common on most campuses to partner with to create an OER team, task force, committee, group, whatever you want to call it. As we talk about each department, we will share tips and missteps that we've experienced in working with these departments or groups. Once we cover the different departments that are good partners in creating an OER team, we're going to break out into some different breakout rooms where you get the opportunity to share your story, your missteps, your successes, your thoughts on OER on your campus. After about 15 minutes, we will regroup into our main session to highlight what each group discussed and have time for questions. Throughout our presentation, please put any questions in the live Q&A. Next slide. Okay, so before we jump in, we want to hear a little bit about you. So on our live poll, what is your current role at your institution? The second thing we kind of want to know is in the discussion forum, if you could put one word describing your current feelings about OER. So right now I see we have about 71% librarians. That just changed to 72 as I said that. 11% administrator. Now it's 15%. We got some good mix of people. Discussion forum, yay, is exactly right. Opportunity, Nito, excited, hopeful. Back to the poll, promising. These are all awesome words. I'm so excited about that. Okay, well, we can get on to the next slide. So it looks like we're mostly librarians here today with a good mix of some faculty, admin, and instructional designers and some other.
So I am Christina Virden. I'm from the MOBIUS Consortium. And I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of community endeavor of building an OER team, implementing strategies and initiatives around the affordability of course materials and open educational resources is often a community project, and it can really benefit from leveraging the expertise and input of multiple departments across a campus. Rarely is one department situated in a way that they can handle all of the challenges and issues that come up in starting an OER initiative. So you can really leverage that sort of collective expertise. For example, faculty and instructors often benefit from support at multiple levels in the process of flipping a course to OER, from discovering and finding materials that are going to work for them, through to determining the best way to leverage things in the LMS, through to finding out whether they can offer print copies of that resource through their bookstore. Ensuring that materials are accessible and usable by all students is vital. There's also issues to consider around representation and inclusion of diverse populations and viewpoints. If you're looking at publishing programs or using open practices in the classroom, like student creation of OER, that can bring up a lot of legal issues around licensing and informed consent and who holds the rights to what the materials that are being created. So there can be a lot to consider beyond just looking at course materials when you're implementing an OER program. So kind of where do you start when you're creating your team? It's important to remember that it's going to be unique. Every institution is very different. Every institution has its own politics and culture. And what works really well at one institution may not work for you, and that's okay. You want to really think about what your current goals are for your A&OER work. Are you just getting started? Are you focusing primarily on education and raising awareness? Do you have targets around adoptions or course marking or flipping courses or savings goals that you're looking to meet institutionally? Are you implementing some kind of certificate program or faculty stipend program? Are you planning to pursue grant funding? Are you looking at publishing and creation and how you can support that? Once you kind of know what you're wanting to achieve with your A&OER program, then you can really start thinking about what the barriers are to getting that done and where that expertise might lie on your campus. We encourage you to get creative when you're thinking about different departments and groups to partner with. We're going to talk a bit about some of the organizations and departments that we've worked with, but it's by no means an exhaustive list. There may be others that we haven't discussed, and we hope to learn from you about where you've had successful partnerships on your campuses.
Hello, this is Kayla Reed at Missouri Southern. So Missouri Southern is a medium-sized academic university in southwestern Missouri. Sorry, it's been a long week. And basically, I started our OER initiatives myself and then grew from there. And one of the biggest partners, the best partners, have been faculty and instructors. Getting them on board is huge because it's their baby. Their courses are very important to them and they're very protective of them, rightfully so. So advocating with faculty is really the best place to start when you're looking down the line at administration, because you don't want this to be something else forced upon your faculty. You want it to be something they're excited about and something they want to participate in. And if it's just an order from administration, then it's just another thing that they're required to do, not something they're excited to do. So I think that's a huge thing to keep in mind. Faculty champions can really encourage their colleagues to consider adoption of OERs and get rid of like hurtful myths. I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody email me or call me and be like, hey, my colleague or somebody in my department said you're the person to reach out to for OER. I didn't reach out to that person. I maybe didn't even know who that person was, but they know who I am because someone told them about OER and told them to reach out to me. So really reaching out to your faculty is hugely important. And this can also help normalize the inclusion of OER within the textbook consideration adoption process. So if it's common, if several faculty on your campus are considering OER, if they're doing it frequently or semester to semester, then others are going to catch on to that and they're going to start doing that as well. And they're going to start asking questions and looking into resources. And then they can also provide really good insights into the challenges of going to OER. We had a task force for a while, it's now a committee, where we had teaching faculty and we didn't necessarily know all of the steps with adopting a textbook. Some departments have to approve a textbook as a department and others don't for certain courses. And so that's a whole nother challenge that we didn't even know existed. So it's really important that you know what's going on at that level because they're essentially your front line. And if you've got a bad front line, you're gonna have a bad time. Next slide, please. Distance learning and instructional designers. I'm really lucky. One of our instructional designers on campus is actually a teaching faculty, and they learned about OER on their own and adopted it, have one of the most successful courses with OER on campus. And she has been an all-star. I can't tell you how much I appreciate her. She has given such good insights onto practices for integration of OER within our LMS. We use Blackboard. She's taught us how to, what's the best way to do this? How do we get around this, etc. All those nitty-gritty technical details that we librarians don't want to deal with usually with LMS systems. They can also help streamline the process for faculty. So for example, on our campus, we make it very clear the library is for discovery of OER and distance learning is for the integration. So we will help you find the materials. Distance learning will put it into your course for you. That way they know step by step they have support, but they're not relying on us for something we really can't deliver on. And then finally, providing demos of how OER will look within a course. Like I said, our instructional designer, one of them, had a course already set up with an OER, and hers was a beautiful example. It was integrated perfectly, embedded into Blackboard. She had excellent feedback from her students. Super, super helpful. Next slide, and that's turn over to Megan.
Thank you, Kayla. So slight confession, everyone. I think all four of us have not worked with accessibility services or have them on our task force, and they weren't at Lindenwood when I left, so they could be now. However, we think they're a super important part and a great department to partner with and have on your team. There have been so many accessibility sessions just these past few days, and I think that also highlight why accessibility are so important when you think about creating or selecting an OER. So what can accessibility services do to help you? So they can guide you in the best practices creating or designing, or if they're faculty is looking into adopting, they can look over that material in case they might want to edit it to make it more accessible. They can account for different learning styles, as well as provide guidance to you for different color patterns, how tables work, how something might be read in a screen reader. So from my personal story, I had a student that is blind, and they had me taking PDFs that they had for their research class, about 5 or 6 a week, transforming them into Microsoft Word, then transforming them back into PDF so that their screen reader could read it. The whole process to change it from a PDF to a Microsoft Word was to catch all the issues that their screen reader might see. So for instance, the word the became ch, C-H-E. So I would have to go through and edit an entire article, 12, 15 pages, just so my student was able to listen to an article. And this is where I went to the accessibility services coordinator at Lindenwood, an amazing human being, to say, what can I do to provide better service, quicker service, because I can't be doing 5 to 6 articles like this a week. So what that opened my eyes to was a lot of things are not accessible and inclusive. So when you're picking your OER, when you're creating your OER, keep those things in mind. And the accessibility services office or coordinator are able to help you with those things. And finally, they can help you navigate ADA compliance. Another big thing, they should know ADA compliance pretty well, so they'll be able to help you with the guidelines with those. Next slide.
This is back to Kayla again. Sorry, we're ping-ponging a bit, but everyone has different experiences. So I'm actually on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee at my university, and this is something that we haven't talked about yet, but is definitely there. Diversity and inclusion initiatives on my campus have really increased in this year. And this is something that I've seen not only from others, but in a lot of OER itself. I've seen in OER groups and chats and things like that, there have been faculty and other people who talk about the possibilities that OER brings with having more diversity included. So identifying perspectives and viewpoints that may be missing or underrepresented. Just recently, I found an LGBT textbook, History of LGBT, and that was really exciting because there aren't a lot that I've seen. So it was really neat to see that and to see that it could be personalized. What if, we wanted to do LGBT in Missouri or LGBT, in a different state? There's a very diverse history in the United States alone of those issues. And so these are really cool things that can be personalized to be more inclusive or more specific, that can examine things on a deeper level. Considering issues of representation and images and examples used, current event going on, I'm sure all the librarians know about it. Dr. Seuss, there are 6 books that his estate is pulling for racist interpretations and images within the books. And so that's a consideration, especially with some older textbooks. If you've ever weeded a collection, you've seen some questionable things more than likely. And so with OER, you can make those updates much quicker and hopefully have better representation. Making sure that you are considering local culture, regional, and geographical issues and interests where appropriate. So this is kind of a weird one to include, but I had a professor approach me about a fishing and hunting OER, but he was very specific about the Missouri region, and that's what he was interested in because it's a very specific course and very specific instruction. And so obviously that's a little off the diversity topic, but it makes the point. If you're focusing in on a tighter area, then OER is going to allow you to do that much easier than if you're having to use a traditional textbook. And you can make that case to your faculty and to admin, because I know a lot of professors who teach very specific courses, and depending on your region, they may want you to focus more on your local kind of history or area. So that's something to consider. And then at very last, avoiding othering, as you put it, or stereotyping. Those kind of things are unfortunately still kind of common in some textbooks with OER. They can be edited out, they can be fixed, or even discussed. So it's something that, again, this is another one where we haven't really worked with them as much, but it's something that's on our radar and something that definitely has a lot of potential. Next slide.
Hi, this is Lisa Farrell at East Central College. I'm going to be talking over the next slides. Just a little FYI, I'm at a community college and we're about 45 minutes west of St. Louis, so it gives you a little perspective on that. From our poll, we did seem to have a lot of librarians in this session right now, so we all know what we can do, but hopefully I can give you a few more clues on why it's important that librarians are at the table. And whether or not you're classified as faculty, I am not classified as faculty, I'm professional staff. But my main proponent to get this moving along was an English faculty member, and he knew to reach out to me, and we've got it back and rolling years ago. So your librarians can act as a discovery center on the campus for OER materials. Not only can all four of us on here, we are serving as system leaders for MOBIUS. So if you are a member of MOBIUS, you can definitely reach out to all four of us for any contact needs having to deal with OER resources. You can also reach out to your campus leaders. Each campus has, well, the majority of campuses, I must say, I didn't look over the list, has a campus leader that also feeds back to OER through MOBIUS as well. So you can get in contact with them. Some of those are librarians, some are administrators within the library, and we also have one that serves with me that is our faculty member as well. If you are a MOBIUS library, you also have access to OEN, which used to be OTN, so you might be familiar with that. So few things to be aware of. At the library, we can consult with faculty and departments during their textbook selection process, or once they're in a course, if they need that supplemental material as well. You know, if you want to bring in something that's current and happening, let us help you find an online resource that's freely available. Something's changing in a textbook, or you just don't like that chapter that it covers. We can find you a chapter that covers the same thing, but better suits your layout and your design. So librarians, we also keep people up to date with new ideas and practices that are happening with OER. Like I said, all four of us on here are very active in what we have going on. Okay, sorry, I was just checking the discussion. I hope, Larry, you've got back with us again. Also, we can help create resource and discovery guides and curate content. Many of you may be familiar using LibGuides, which I know is one material that I use to help create content for our OER, not only for our students to find our OER textbooks, but we also use LibGuides for our faculty to understand more about OER. You could have something specific just to your course that has OER resources on that. Some use other programs or a website and things of that nature. We also have curate content through the OER Commons Hub. MOBIUS has an overlying hub within OER Commons, and then many other MOBIUS libraries are broken out further deeper. So your university or college may already have one up there. If not, feel free to look in there and find a comparable school and see what they have, and maybe you're going to ask your librarian to start building a hub for you. Trainings, events, and all things that we're good at, please reach out to your library staff if you need help with any trainings just to get started on OER and share great things about that. Some libraries even have staff that focus on OER as one of their job responsibilities. This has been really up and coming in the last few years. So there may be one particular person that you can go to that's their little niche. So reach out for that information. Next slide, please. Administration. Good thing to have administration at the table is to help you get it in and build this as part of promotion and tenure process for your faculty. Okay, we really need to have their support on this. It could also be monetary support. Can they provide a stipend? Help you get some grant? Can it be linked to professional development? So make sure you have administration involved at that table. It can also be something that you look at and get involved with. Maybe a good reason to take a sabbatical because you are going to convert to an OER for your courses, or maybe you're even going to write an OER textbook and other peripherals for that as well. So keep them in mind, keep them at the table as well. Administration is helpful to get the word out. I don't always contact the deans and department heads directly. Administration can help get that to filter down to faculty and also suggest maybe some other leave times and things of that nature. The deans and department heads, depending on what you're looking at, may know here's a course that's changing, or maybe here's a faculty that's changing that you can get involved with and grab that niche a little bit. They can help you create those campus-wide incentive and events. Like I said about the stipends, you can get some budget approval with administration to have stipends available. Some we have seen put OER on their strategic plans. And so that is a huge initiative to get things rolling as well. Assistance with promotion across various units. So we still have a little bit of a silo effect in some departments. At different colleges and universities, as much as we try to communicate across the board, sometimes you still have a little bit of that silo effect. And when you get administration at the table and talking, it can help filter that down a little bit better. We want to make sure faculty are aware of what's available. But on the same token, we want to make sure that admissions and advising is aware as well, because this can be a very affordable cost issue for students to say, you know, this program we have, it has zero cost textbooks involved with it. Or as a freshman with these first 4 courses, you might only end up spending $200 for your other 2 course textbooks because these other are using an OER option. So there's a lot of players that you don't necessarily need all at the table, but you want that information to filter down to them, and your administration can help with that. And of course, support for trainings and conferences like this one. last year's symposium actually came down from my VP going, did you sign up for this yet? And I unfortunately was at the Tech Expo presenting on OER, so we were on the same day and I could not attend, but my VP ended up attending this last year. So that's also great to have that available as well. One little caveat I want to put in there, because I did hear from faculty, is our faculty enjoyed that we sort of had this as a ground up effort. We got some faculty super excited about it and they started seeing some movement, and then we included that administration. So it wasn't mandated from top down, it was supported. So a little different there to keep that take on. I think it works a little better when everybody feels that they are equally important on the team and have something to say at the table as well on that. Next slide, please. The bookstore. This is usually where we get a little bit of going, but what about the bookstore? That money, it's not coming in anymore. Well, I hate to tell you, money hasn't been coming in. So let me tell you about getting the bookstore on your team. It is a great thing to have your bookstore involved. Whether it is a part of your campus system or even a third party like a Barnes & Noble bookstore, make sure they are at that table. So it's not just of, oops, what happened? Nobody's ordering books anymore. There are some great options, even if your campus is moving to some OER. Okay, some OER creators have hardback print copies available. We use a few of them from OpenStax on my campus. Our bookstore did a wonderful job getting the new copies the first semester, and now they are actually able to resell the used copies as well. So that's worked out really well for our bookstore. Looking at some of those numbers, they're actually selling more of those OER textbooks than when it was a traditional publisher's textbook, mainly due to the price. So it was great to have them at the table. Also, if it is not already printed in a hardback fashion, some OERs do allow you to print on site, and your bookstore could be able to sell those. Depending on the creator, there may be just a little bit of a markup allowed, or it could be just the cost of the printings. Our bookstore also is overhead of our media services, imaging services. So that might be something, if those printers on your campus, they might need to be involved as well. Also, if you are looking at affordability, because our title is A&OER. Affordability, we have a lot of different qualifications for that. I believe Kayla's on her campus is 40 and under. At East Central, we look, affordability is considered 50 and under. That is just individually set at your own campus, but it's still a material that your bookstore can sell. They might look at other ways to bring that price down. They're aware of the vendors that they work with. They might already have a relationship that you can talk with them as well. Our bookstore let me know that they only buy this one particular title from this vendor and it's very expensive. Is there anything else out there? Since that faculty member was retiring, so we took a little initiative to search out a few changes and suggested. At this point, because it's an adjunct teaching that, they did not take us up on it. They stuck with what was available at the time, and totally understand that. I also want to lead back to what Kayla said involved in the book adoption process. And just knowing that has been very informative for me to know those steps, the timelines, and the bookstore as well when they need to know things. And couple side notes for savings from the bookstore is they had a hard time with their rental returns during COVID. So that was a liability our bookstore had to carry over, was rentals that weren't returned, and also a liability of shipping cost. If too many books are purchased, but the students don't buy those books, the bookstore still has to send those back. And that is an unfortunate cost. So don't always look at what their sales are, but more of what their business are when you bring them to the table as well. Next slide.
All right, it's Megan again. Final group we're going to talk about is student organizations, or just getting students to the table. When you really think about it, this is the group that's going to be impacted most by OER selections. And their voices are super important because they are one of the biggest stakeholders at your institution. So student government associations are a great place to start. My director of reference actually went and presented at a student government association. This was right before COVID hit, so I believe everything halted because students went away and then they never came back last year. Students can advocate to administration on their own behalf, so they can talk about how current commercial textbooks are currently impacting them. These nice 3 smiley face pictures is a social media campaign that I did last year at Lindenwood University, literally this time last year. I was sitting outside the lunchroom asking students, how much did you spend on textbooks this year and what could you have spent that money on? Outside of the funny responses of I could have spent it on food and beer, I got some real responses. When I did another little side thing of like, what school do you belong to and what's the average price you spent on books? Between like 300 and 600 was common. When I picked these pictures, I realized I picked all 3 that had $600. But the students answered with some nice things. So dog supplies and car repair was on the first one. This student had just recently had her car break down, and so she had about $800 in expenses. The second student had $600 that they had spent on textbooks, and they would have preferred to spend that on their medical bills. They had some medical issues that year. And the last student, again, $600, and they wanted to go visit their family. So this student lived in Venezuela. Venezuela, very turbulent times, but they would have loved to have been able to go home and spend time with their family, and that $600 could have helped. So this was a campaign I did on social media, linking back to the bookstore. Lindenwood is Barnes & Noble. They were not very happy with me, so I hope that tides have been calmer since. But they can, students can definitely advocate to administration on their behalf. And one of the coolest things, in my opinion, about OER, you get to create, you get to edit, but students can also contribute to OER through open pedagogy. And so I took a new job at St. Louis County Library in August, and when I was in the summer term, one of the faculty I was talking with was looking into creating a book for their course, and they wanted to get all their students involved so that their students would be having their voice put into this book, that it could then be out there and published for others to see. When you're looking for OER, you can see this in a lot of other institutions where students write a chapter or they write up a paper, and then that paper becomes a chapter in a book, and then it's out there free for other people to take and use. So student organizations are pretty great to team up with because they are the voice of your campus as well as the faculty. And with the student government, like they're already involved on campus, they're super excited about, student welfare. So they're going to maybe want to be involved too. So it's a great group to work with. Next slide. All right, we're going to break out into sessions. So this is going to be your time for you guys to turn on your cameras, turn on your microphones. You finally get to see us, and we're going to talk about your challenges and missteps, your thoughts, your feelings with OER. We do have 4 different rooms that are going to last 15 minutes each. After we are done with the breakouts, we're going to come back. We're going to debrief. Kayla, Christina, Lisa, and I are going to talk about what happened in each of our rooms, and then we're going to have time for questions. In the breakout room, you will be able to unmute yourselves and turn on your cameras. However, for feedback control, remain muted until you want to speak up. So that's just to help with feedback. Quick note, the discussion forum is for everybody. So if you were to put something in the breakout room and you're like, I'm going to type my thoughts, it's going to go to everybody and not just your breakout room. Totally cool if that's the way you need to do it. You can say like, I'm in room number blah, and then type your response. And then to join a breakout room, there's going to be a green button or a button that has a selection of letters, and you're going to join whatever that room is of the last names. So, thank you, everybody. We had some really great discussions in my breakout room. So we'll go to the last slide so we can see our emails. I believe Lisa was the one that said you could always feel free to reach out to Kayla, Christina, myself, or herself. So always feel free to email us. Did we want to go through, I can see my people, do we want to go through and talk about what each of our rooms talked about, or just open it for questions?
I'm good with opening it for questions. It was just, I had a small room. There was 3 of us. So
I
we'd
had
be
the
interested to hear. Yeah.
I won, guys.
I guess, and maybe I'd love to hear if you guys had anything on how to get administration to the table. Any more help on that, or ideas anybody suggested?
I kind of talked about how basically, with our university, we were very lucky because part of our strategic plan includes affordability, which OER is recognized as. But that really happened because we had one really good example. We had one department adopt an OER and get rid of rental books, which saved the university thousands. So if you can have one situation like that and bring that to admin, usually that's enough. Because if that can happen in one department, how much would it save in all the departments, or several departments? The big thing we talked about was getting the language included in the faculty handbook. That's a big part of, helping faculty, having it be part of the promotion and tenure process, which if you get admin on board, you'll send that to them and hopefully they'll approve it. Once it goes through the 50,000 committees it has to go through. So I'd say just bringing proof to admin that it's going to work, or it's going to help, or at the very least it's not going to hurt, is a big advantage.
Okay, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to enter them into the live Q&A. I have that pulled up.
I wanted to bring up something really quickly that came up in my group. Both of the people in my group were either not yet working in a library or working at a very grassroots level. And one of the things that was mentioned was it's not necessarily going to be about getting people on your team at this stage. For some people, it might just be about making sure that departments across your campus are aware of what's going on and what you're doing, and kind of just building those relationships and starting those conversations. Like maybe there's no formal structure, maybe you don't have your team yet, maybe you don't have specific roles for different groups, but just kind of keeping folks in the loop and kind of talking about it was definitely important.
Yeah, we started as just an interest group, which was myself, a student from student government, who actually approached me and asked if they could be involved, and me reaching out to our distance learning, head of distance learning and bookstore, and saying, hey, there's this thing called OER, could you maybe join this group and talk about it? And they said yes, and so that was very great. But that's how it started, and it grew from there. After the initial interest group, it became a task force, which included teaching faculty, more instructional designers, more librarians, etc. And now it's part of a permanent committee. It's not its own permanent committee, but it's part of one, its own subcommittee, which includes teaching faculty, the bookstore, and distance learning. So yeah, I think that's a great point. Just reaching out and finding who will support you at the beginning can be a big difference. Even if it's just like one teaching faculty, that's one more than you had before. And there's probably a lot of faculty already using free resources on your campus. They just aren't reporting it or telling people. So finding those people can really make a difference.
And that leads really well into one of our questions. Do you have suggestions for how we can facilitate tracking usage of OER? Having hard numbers would help with administration buy-in. I know on a personal level at Lindenwood, I had to reach out to people and ask, what are you using? I made a whole, this is a lot of time, so I'm not suggesting it, but I made an entire Excel sheet going through each of the classes for the semester once, seeing who was using OER and where I could actually make those connections. I then created a faculty champion page on Lindenwood's OER's guide. It's a LibGuide, highlighting the people that were actually using it. tracking though, I did not have huge success. I know we've talked about it as a group.
I sort of did a lot of the hard labor myself as well, and we got started with a Comp 1 and 2 handbook, and then I would go to IR, find out who was all enrolled in the classes, how many bodies were there. Then I would go to the bookstore and say, how much was your book that you sold last year physically? And then I would actually do all the hard labor and figure out that dollar amount. But as Megan said and Kayla said, sometimes you don't know they're using an OER. And I still grabbed a couple and said, how do I represent them? And I didn't always grab that information. One example was CIS, and obviously being computer information systems, they were using contemporary, fresh information. So they always provided links and access points and things that were readily available to their students. And I'm like, well, how do I even grab you? Because technically, but I figured out a way to at least include them in the LibGuide, but they'd been doing it so long they didn't get looped into my figures. Comp 1 was a great one and an easy one. But yeah, I had to go in and look at each individual courses and count how many were successful and then just do the raw data and figure out the dollar amounts. It can be hard. I think there's still that come up and go, hey, I was using this online book too. I just didn't tell you about it yet. And a lot of that's getting looped in that process.
For us, it was the partnerships between distance learning and the bookstore made all the difference, because the bookstore added the OER option to the textbook selection. And it was made clear to faculty that we wanted to know that. So they started reporting it. And then in addition, distance learning, whenever they would help integrate OER, they would make note of it and make sure it was reported in the statistics. So that's kind of how we went from no statistics whatsoever to some really great ones. I mentioned in our group that we went from we had a 900% increase in OER usage on our campus, but the actual numbers aren't like huge or anything, but it's just a huge increase because now we actually have data. Now people actually know what OER is, and we actually have OER consultations, which we didn't have before I started offering them. So I would really encourage you, if you're having trouble with statistics or knowing how many, reaching out to the bookstore just for that, because they're probably going to be the best ones to record that data, depending how your campus works. This is how our campus works. If you have a private bookstore like Barnes & Noble, I don't know if they do that or not. So
To do some snooping then.
Yeah.
Let me go look at that price tag myself.
And that echoes what Andrea said in the Q&A, is this is a good conversation to have with the bookstore. And I know in our group, representative from UMSL talked about how the bookstore gave them a list of who was using OER.
So we just have a few seconds left. I just want to thank you very much to our presenters today, and thank you to all of you for attending this session. Just a couple of quick things to note. Please provide your feedback on this session through the survey that will pop up when you leave. There were some technical issues yesterday, and we were not able to get feedback on every session. If you attended a session yesterday and were unable to give feedback, you should be able to go back into that session and leave feedback now. And finally, session recordings will be up next week for those of you who could not attend all of the presentations. Have a great day, everyone.